Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this conversation with the artists Kay Walkingstick and Jean Quick to See Smith. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here today speaking with two such distinguished artists who are both featured in the National Museum of the American Indians exhibition Stretching the Canvas, 8 Decades of Native Painting. I'd like to begin by gratefully acknowledging the Native peoples from whose ancestral homelands we gather today, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their homes in these places today. And now it's a privilege to introduce our two guests. Kay Walkingstick, an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, has had over 30 solo exhibitions in the US and Europe. Her work is in the permanent collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the National Gallery of Canada, the Israel Museum, the Newark Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and numerous other museums across the US and internationally. Walkingstick taught painting and drawing for 17 years at Cornell University, where she is now Professor Emerita. The recipient of honorary doctorates from Pratt Institute and Arcadia University, she is a fellow of the National Academy of Design and the American Academy of Arts. In 2015, an acclaimed retrospective of her work opened at the National Museum of the American Indian and traveled to a number of other venues across the country. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
And Jean Quick to See Smith is an enrolled Salish member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Nation of Montana and describes herself as a cultural arts worker. She's internationally known as an artist, lecturer, printmaker, and freelance professor, as well as a mentor. She has given over 200 lectures at museums and universities internationally, and has been shown in over 125 solo exhibits and over 650 group exhibits. She is the recipient of numerous awards and honorary degrees, and her work is in collections such as the Museum of Modern Art in Quito, Ecuador, the Museum of Mankind in Vienna, Austria, the Walker Art Center, the Museum of Modern Art, the Brooklyn Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. Welcome, Jean. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And thank you. And did either of you have anything you wanted to say as we get started?
I would like to acknowledge all of the Pueblo people, the 19 Pueblos that live here, including Sandia Pueblo that possibly would have been on the land I'm on currently, and the Navajo Reservation in all, and Apache. There are 22 reservations here, and I'm grateful to be able to work here in relationship and strengthening community in this territory.
Thank you, Jean.
And I would like to say that I'm in Easton, Pennsylvania, and this is Lenape land. And the land that I actually live on was taken, purchased, cheated is a clearer word, by the sons of William Penn. So it was taken a long time ago, but it's Lenape land.
Thank you, Kay. And thank you both again. I guess we'll start our conversation. You've spent most of your careers living and working on opposite sides of the continent, including Montana and New Mexico for Jean, and New York, New Jersey, and now Pennsylvania for Kay. But you were part of the same relatively close-knit circle of Native American contemporary artists in the late 20th century, and really coming into this century too. And you participated in a number of the same important exhibitions over the years. Women of Sweetgrass, Cedar, and Sage, for example, and Our Land Ourselves. So I would love to start by hearing a little about how you first became aware of each other's work and how you came to know one another. Jean, would you like to begin?
I was reading Art in American about 1977 or 1978, and I saw a review in Art in America about a woman with a what I thought was probably a native name. So I went to New York and I went to her gallery and asked them, was this a native woman? And they said yes. And I said, could I contact her? And they said, no, you can leave your name and address and we will give her the information. And I said, well, could I have her address? And they said, no, we will contact her. So, so that was the way I started. So then I wrote her a letter, and I was very cheeky and like a forward because there weren't that you could count on, like my husband said the other day, one hand. I said two hands. He said one hand. The Native Americans that were actually showing nationally in those days. And so I wrote to her and said, "Oh, I've got this group here called Gray Canyon that I've organized, and I thought you might like to join us and maybe show with us." And she didn't get excited about it and wrote back and said she would be happy to meet me for coffee, but she wasn't interested in that. So it was good because I was just a little overwrought with organizing this group, and we were so excited about the things we were doing. But she was in New York, and she worked with feminist artists, and so she had a different view of the art world. But anyway, to make a long story short, we started there. I invited her to conferences. I would go to New York and let her know I was there. Sometimes she was too busy. She had a plumber coming or something, and so I would get to meet her for coffee. That's kind of how we started. And
Well,
no, she
that's
didn't join
interesting
Gray
the way you
Canyon.
described it. But it's true that Jean found me. She just found me. And my then dealer was not the friendliest person in the world. In fact, she was kind of impossible. But uh, there was a general feeling among, I had two dealers at the time, one on the West Coast and one in New York. And the view was that it was a mistake to show with Native people because, and this is horrible, they weren't taken seriously. And so my dealers were discouraging me from showing with Jean. And I got this lovely letter from Jean. It was a beautiful letter. And I felt that absolutely I wanted to show with other Native people. After all, I'm a Cherokee, why wouldn't I show with other Native people? So I encouraged it, as I recall. And it is true, I probably had a plumber coming. But it was a pleasure for me and a wonderful thing. I felt very, very good about it. And I was thrilled that Jean asked. And there was a Gray Canyon show in New York, which is the first time that she and I met. And I was very impressed with the work. I thought it was wonderful work. And I was eager to show with other Native people.
Well, this leads into my next question, which is something that is addressed in the exhibition Stretching the Canvas, 8 Decades of Native Painting, which highlights both of your work, and it includes nearly 40 paintings from the museum's collection, dating from the early 20th century to the present. So the exhibition pays particular attention to some of the obstacles that Native artists have faced in having their work recognized, collected, exhibited, and critically assessed. So I'd like to ask each of you if you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges or resistance that you encountered early in your careers as Native artists and as women too. And have there been times when these posed maybe less difficulty than you expected? Do you want to start, Kay?
Well, as I'd said before, there was this feeling on the part of these two galleries that I shouldn't show with Native people, which I thought was nonsense. I really did. And I suspect that was a general feeling among a lot of people in the profession that Native work wasn't serious, which that infuriated me actually. Um, that was not such a problem for me though, because I just overlooked them. I just ignored them. I certainly think that being a woman was a problem. I mean, that was a serious problem in New York in when I started out. Um, you don't need to know all the stories, but the point is that I think that for me, at least, the bigger problem was being a female, being a woman in the arts. The fact that I'm um, part Cherokee and that I have this great Indian name, somehow that didn't create such a problem for me. Um, maybe I don't know why. Uh, I have just always stumbled on. I just keep going. That's the only way to make art, anyway, is just to keep going. Get off your rear end and do it. And that's
Hmm.
kind of how I approached it, all of it. I tried to ignore the remarks.
Yeah. And how about you, Jean?
Well, venues for Native women or men. In Santa Fe, the women were showing in the Trading Post, and the Native men were showing with Lane Horwich or some of the mainstream. Um, and in the early days, if I was in an exhibition with Native men, they would go to one side of the room and leave me on the other side of the room. And so one of the reasons that I began organizing contemporary Native artists here was so that we as a group would have more strength and more power. And so we could do exhibitions by ourselves. So as I worked one summer, I got 13 venues for us here, but they were all in banks, churches, restaurants, not in any museum, not in any gallery. And that's how I began Gray Canyon. I carried Gray Canyon for 4 years while I was also organizing the first traveling Native American woman show, Women of Sweetgrass, Cedar, and Sage, with 24 women, and getting the catalog together with Lucy Lepard and Harmony Hammond. Um, and I noticed recently that Minnesota Arts Institute claimed that they just did the first traveling women's show in this country, which is not true because I did that in 1982. And then I began putting together the first traveling Native photographers show. There'd never been photographs taken by Native people, of Native people. And so that was that one took me 5 years to put together. But that was my whole uh, modus operandi here, you could say, was in bringing forward the contemporary Native artists and finding places for them to show.
Hmm. As I mentioned earlier, you organized, and both of you were part of a number of really important early exhibitions in the 80s that started to bring together a lot of these artists, started to create this community, which I think has been so important.
I
So,
think John has credit for that.
yeah, I agree. You've done such incredible work organizing and curating and bringing together all of these people. Um, So I want to talk about another theme that the Stretching the Canvas exhibition touches on. So the exhibition makes the argument that for Native American artists in the 20th century, picking up a paintbrush and painting on canvas was a revolutionary act. And I think that may be something that's true a little bit earlier in the 20th century in particular with some of the early works in the exhibition, but do you feel like this was the case for you? And what was it that drew you to painting in particular? How has painting been the right medium for you to convey and accomplish what you've wanted to do with your work? Would you like to start, Kay?
This is my family business. We're a bunch of painters. Um, I came from a family that made art, and painting was always the central interest. And when I went to college, I loved painting. But I don't think that it's true that it's so unusual to be painters. I mean, when you look at that show that Margaret Archuleta did, the name of which escapes me at this moment, but it was showed early painters from the uh, like 1910, 1912. I mean, I don't think painting is that unusual once people decide to be artists. In
Mhm.
fact, I think it's kind of natural. And uh, certainly when I came to it in 1952, uh, painting was not dead yet. Of course, it still isn't, but there was none of this talk that painting's dead. There was painting was the central part of art making, and it still is for me, of course. Always will be.
Mhm. And how about you, Jean? I know you bring a lot of collage into your work too, but what is it about painting that feels really important to you, or really like a powerful way of expressing yourself?
Well, one thing that's different about my background from Kay's background is that, my dad was a horse trader, a literate horse trader. And so I come out of a family well, and my whole tribe is a trading tribe. I come out of a family that did a lot of trading, and so, as a little kid, I can remember living in these one-room cabins with two other families, and my sister and I would dig through the garbage piles for food in the daytime at the back of the cabins. And I just remember always being hungry and always being sick. And of course, there weren't toys or paints or anything. When I went to the first grade, that's where I first uh, saw crayons, and that's the first I saw tempera paint. And if we got our work finished, we were allowed to paint. And the crayons smelled great, but they didn't taste very good. They were crumbly in your mouth. The library paste tasted better. And, little Indian kids always smell stuff and then they eat it, they taste it. That's what I did. And the tempera paint was kind of gritty, but I really loved what it did. And I didn't know the word for artist at that time, but that just carried me forward. I mean, I read about it when I was 13. I rode in the back of a pickup truck. I worked for the Japanese people since I was 8 years old as a field hand, and they took us to the movies on Saturday, and I got to see the movie Toulouse-Lautrec. And so I came home and dressed in my dad's clothes and put axle grease on my chin and asked the neighbor down the road if he would take a picture of me. So I thought that a woman couldn't be an artist, but if I looked like a man, I could be an artist. And by having my picture taken that way, it was like it cemented this thing. And then when I was about 16, I sent away for the famous artist course. My dad let me use some of my field hand money for that. And it was all men in the pictures, and they were all smoking. So I took up smoking, thinking, okay, that's going to make me an artist. I can be a real artist this way. So that's kind of how I started it.
Yeah, I love that photograph of you, Jean, when you were young, dressed up like Toulouse-Lautrec too. I don't know if you've seen that photo, Kay.
I have not, but it
Um,
sounds wonderful.
yeah. So, well, now I'd like to talk about some of your specific paintings, and particularly some of the work that's in the exhibition, Stretching the Canvas. While you've both approached it in very different ways, the landscape has been a recurring theme in both of your work, and the representation of particular places has been really important. Um, Both of you have shown a strong interest in the stories and the histories that are embedded in the landscape and in the places that you portray, and as also in the other people and other living beings who inhabit these places or who once did. So Jean, we've got your painting, the Red Lake series number 5, which is included in the exhibition. Could you talk a little bit about that piece and about just about the significance of representing the landscape in your work?
I spent a lot of time researching Native American sites all over the western United States into Canada. And I'm plateau, so there's a large area that we are from. and that spread California, Oregon, Washington, all the way up into Canada, all the way up the coast of Alaska, Bella Coola, all the way up is our territory. And because we were a trading tribe, we moved through those places. And so I remember my father, who was born in 1901, talking about traveling with the salt trains into Canada to the Métis and the Crees to trade with them. So part of the heritage, and of course my tribe, being a trading tribe, we have 6 of the 7 life zones, and we have a lot of medicine plants. So that's also part of our trading life as well, and also harvesting the foods. And we still do that to this day. So at home, they're digging bitterroot and camas, harvesting, of course, fish and and large animals. And so it's a whole composite of that, which is all involved with the land. So the land gives us everything, even today. So we have a ceremony called Honoring the River, and every spring we go out to do that. There's also the Bitterroot ceremony, which we do in the springtime. So Coyote helped Amatkin turn on the lights, and Coyote all the places across the reservation and has named everything. So at home now, they're putting up the signs and naming all of these places in Salish. So I just, grew up with this and my father traveling across the land. I learned so much about mapping from my father and where he would go to trade horses. So everything that I paint, everything that I draw has landscape laced through it. It is all there. And right now I'm making maps of the United States. These are landscapes, and I'm writing on them because landscape is always inhabited. And when white people talk about wilderness or empty space, there is no such thing in Indian life.
And do you want to say a little bit about the Red Lake series in particular? I don't think there's been a lot written about that series, and I think I really love this painting in the museum's collection, and would like to hear a little bit about it.
Well, it's part of Métis life, and when I was making demarcations of the land,
Mhm.
Red Lake series, Wallowa Waterhole, um, um, I had Camas, I had Camas Prairie, um, Arley. I have names for all the places around my reservation. So uh, I would do a series of work, and then give it a name of the land.
Okay, thank you. And Kay, look at one of your early landscape pieces. It's an early diptych called Late Summer on the Ramapo.
Yeah, the Ramapo River is it's a trout stream, really. It's a wide trout stream, but it's certainly not a river like the Hudson or the Mississippi. And it's a place that my first husband and I used to visit often. And I fell in love with it. And I had been painting abstractions up until about 85. And I started combining those abstractions, which had a very geological look. The abstractions themselves were related to landscape. They weren't they weren't absolute descriptions of the landscape. They were feelings about the landscape, or uh, relationship to the colors of the landscape, or the kind of um, energy that the landscape had. And so I combined these abstractions with what I would call a kind of realism, naturalism. It isn't certainly high naturalism like you might see in a 19th century, late 19th century painting, but it is nevertheless realism. And so this is a painting about late summer on this lovely trout stream in northern New Jersey. And it the color relates to the um, leaves and landscape starting to change color toward fall. So it really is about that experience with the landscape that I have always drawn much pleasure from.
So, in the mid 1970s, both of you, interestingly, created works addressing Nez Perce Chief Joseph and his followers. This was about 100 years after their 1877 surrender. And each of you described a personal, though quite different, connection to this story. Um, and in each of them, I think the landscape played a very important role. Jean, could we start with you talking about your Wallowa Waterhole series?
Uh, uh, Chief Joseph Nez Perce is a hunting partner. They were hunting partners of my tribe. And even though they spoke Sahatchin, we spoke Salish, our dances and our uh, clothing, regalia, all that is very much the same. We shared two very similar cultures, and they were always friends of ours. So at home, in the offices at Salish Kootenai College and around the reservation, you see pictures of Chief Joseph because he was such a hero and because of what he did, with his tribe, saving their lives. And the place that he lived in was a very fertile valley, like the valley where my tribe is right now. And so I use that as as a story, because all my pictures all have stories behind them. I mean, Coyote is so important to my tribe because he's the teacher, and she is the teacher, and all of our stories come out of the land and the things that she did, and so all my artwork all has stories, and they have teaching stories. And so I used Chief Joseph and his bravery as the background for these works, which are in essence related to my tribe because the Nine Pipe Bird Game Reserve is on my reservation. So you see the water holes. So I used that because they had water holes, probably glacial, like we have as well. And so he's an important figure on the plateau for all the plateau tribes.
And Kay, you also addressed the story of Chief Joseph and his followers and the removal from their traditional territory in homage to Chief Joseph, which is included in the exhibition.
Um, I got started involved with him when I was, well, many, many years ago now. And I was probably in my early 30s. And I didn't know my father. My father was a severe alcoholic, and my mother left him when she was pregnant with me very wisely. And she had four other children. She was in Oklahoma and managed to um, get home on a bus to her family in Syracuse, New York. So I was not raised with my father. Um, I did not know him really, but I did meet him later in life. Um, he was somewhat sobered up by then. And I said to him, I want to make a painting about a great Indian. Who would you suggest? And this Cherokee man said, oh, well, of course, Chief Joseph. And so that started me on the path. It was one of the few things my father ever actually said to me. So it started me on this path of researching Chief Joseph and his Nez Perce people and the trek they made across Idaho and Montana trying to get to Canada. This whole story I have used in my paintings for years and years. And I see him as a great American hero. Now, I'm certain that he is a hero to many young Native people, but he should also be a hero for everyone because he was an amazingly brilliant man who was incredibly brave and tried to do something virtually impossible. So that I have used the Parfleche bags made by the Nez Perce women. And it is true that many of those Siouan patterns are very similar. And I have used the stories and I have used the battlefields of Chief Joseph. So he and his people and the ideas that he um, gave us filled my paintings for years, really.
Mhm. And you also addressed the story of Chief Joseph in the Chief Joseph, which was begun about the same time, I believe. And
Oh
so
well,
here
this
are
was a
three.
series. This was a series of small paintings, and you'll notice that there's arcs in them. They're a portion of a circle, and those arcs are derived from the shape, the negative shapes around the previous painting. So they're all related. And there were, I believe, 36 of them altogether, but I'm not certain. Um, and the NMAI has a number of them, but they were
Mhm.
all very reduced color, all related in use of shape and the manner of doing it, the method of making them. But none of them are repeated, so they're all different.
Mhm.
And it relates to the. I thought of it as relating to the trek across Montana, is these related forms and walking past them, and they relate to a kind of dirge, uh, uh, meant as an honorific, meant as a memorial uh, to these really brave people. Um,
Mhm.
Chief Joseph was a famous orator, and so he's well known for his great final speech about "We will fight no more." And but he was also a military genius, which um, I think is I think is still talked about. Um, so these paintings are really meant to honor this great man, great Native man,
Mhm.
this great American.
I'd like to look at both of your most recent paintings in the exhibition. And so I'd like to start with Jean's painting, which addresses again this a very similar story, Trade Canoe Adrift. Um, I'd like you to ask you both to talk a little bit about how about these works and about how your approach has shifted over time. Each of these paintings again seems to address Indigenous peoples' deep connections to, and too often their displacement from their homeland. So, Jean, would you begin by talking about Trade Canoe Adrift and maybe also about the series that it's a part of, the Trade Canoe series?
Well, I've been doing trade canoes for about 25 years, and I do them, generally when I have something to say because they're big pieces. Um, I think some of them are almost 18 feet long, and and each one of them presents a different situation with the environment. So I have one about the mascots at the Chrysler Museum. I have one at the Yellowstone that's about the Tongass, which is now back in the news, and uh,
Mhm.
President Trump has fast-tracked the cutting of the old-growth trees in the Tongass. And of course, there are tribes in that area and friends that I've been writing to there and signing petitions against that. So I thought when I did the Tongass canoe that that would be maybe obsolete uh, and same for the mascots. But here in this one, the people were crossing the Mediterranean, all the migrants that were fleeing from the wars in the Middle East. And so I did this at the same time that I was working with the Duwamish tribe in Seattle. I've been working toward a public art piece to recognize the Duwamish people, who are Chief Seattle's people, and they have not been given recognition by the federal government. And the idea that a bunch of old white men have to give recognition for you being a Native person is just a crime. It's criminal. It makes me really angry. And so I was back in Seattle visiting at the Longhouse, and I came home, and then I started working on this canoe about adrift, that they leave the Duwamish people there on the river so that they can't fish, they can't do something that they're supposed to be doing, and because they don't have recognition. And then at the same time, people were dying and boats were overcrowded in the Middle East. So yeah, you can see this is an overcrowded canoe here.
Mm-hmm. And Kay, I think you're approaching this in quite a different way, but also touching on similar themes about Indigenous peoples' connection to and deep relationships with their traditional homelands. And could you talk a little bit about this piece, please? New Mexico Desert.
Yes, this is New Mexico Desert, and I did sketches of the desert there, rather specific sketches. I remember writing in the colors that I should use. This is north of Santa Fe. This scene, and it's I think a beautiful, beautiful place. It's very rugged, very empty, very serene. It's just gorgeous country. And on top of that, I placed a pattern based on a Navajo rug. This is Navajo country. And I wanted to identify this place as Navajo land. And so I used this pattern, but of course I changed the colors. The Navajo rugs usually don't use turquoise and orange, or peachy orange, or whatever that color is. So I do take liberties with the colors, but my paintings for many years now have been landscapes. It's a double square format. I happen to like that shape, that long shape, which relates to the stretch of the land. I travel around the country doing drawings, taking photographs, and make paintings based on my research, my image research. The point of this all is to make people realize that this is native land. This is Indian land. We're all living in Indian territory, every single one of us. And I want them to know whose land it is. In addition, I want people to look at it and say, this is our beautiful place in the cosmos. This is our beautiful earth, and we really have to take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And while we're on the subject of landscape, perhaps we could skip ahead to look at a couple of other slides of your some of your more recent pieces. So this is Our Land. Would you like to talk a little about that, Kay?
Yes, I would, because this is a Nez Perce, a parfleche bag done by the Nez Perce women. It was, as far as I know, traditional in most of the tribes, perhaps not all, but most, that the women made the parfleche bags. And they are abstractions. They are abstractions probably of what they saw around them. They're their environment. Uh, they are the first modernists. These are the Parfleche bags are just terrific, and I love them. And I started this painting is actually earlier than the previous painting. I really started using the patterns because of the Parfleche bags and the idea of using native patterns on landscape went from there. This is the Bitterroot Mountains, by the way, between Montana and Idaho, which Chief Joseph and his uh, group crossed on foot, of course, with their horses. They were also traders, so they took their horses.
And Kay, I think as you've discussed, many of these abstract geometric patterns are also based on forms in the landscape, and so you're kind of overlaying landscape forms over the landscape.
Yes, I am assuming that these are based on landscape, but I have never read that they were specifically based on landscape. But it certainly looks like it relates to landscape. And if you're living in the mountains or with mountains in the back, you would certainly be affected by that hugely.
Hmm.
These women were terrific artists.
Yeah. And
Gaylord Torrance wrote about the Parfleche bags extensively, and one of the things he said is that the women did abstraction. The men, of course, drew their histories on buffalo robes, but the women used abstraction because the women are closer to the cosmos, which I always thought was true.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
And Jean, maybe we could take a look at a couple of your other paintings that we have a little later in the slides. And this is Herding from the Petroglyph Park series. Would you talk a little about this piece, Jean? Again, it's the land. The land again is very important in this piece, but it's another very interesting and powerful story connected to the land.
Well, I first want to say that the land of the Bitterroot Mountains is land that we had to sign away in the Hellgate Treaty. So it was territory that belonged to Salish people, to my tribe. Um, this piece I did after I had been home and I had seen the fence posts painted orange, and people were saying to me, "Don't cross that land, where the fence posts are painted orange, because we have a checkerboard reservation, and the white people there don't want Indian people walking on their land, and so during hunting season, we have a right to hunt across the reservation, but they painted the fence post orange, telling us that we'd be shot if we stepped onto their land." So I did this painting called Herding because in the western United States, the land was open uh, to all of our migrations in harvesting food. And when the white people came in, they began putting up fences, of course, and creating rangelands for their cattle. So this is about the freedom of herding animals and of also Indian people being able to move freely throughout the western United States. And at the same time, fences were being erected and forcing people and animals. So, like the fence at the border right now is another fence that's keeping out the jaguars. We have two in Arizona, maybe, but they will not be able to mate or move freely. So, the idea of herding people into small locations, or the Indian people at the border down here. So this painting, when it began talking about herding and about fencing things off, also now has a relationship to fencing off this political border and keeping the armadillos and the jaguars and the animals and the butterflies even that have to move back and forth, because this was an international highway, trading highway for Indian people. So herding has an important message.
Mhm. Thank you. Um,
It's a particularly beautiful painting, John.
Thank you, Kay.
It is. There have been efforts in the past at making American art museums more inclusive, but these have often been fleeting and lasting change has been elusive. So I'm thinking of multiculturalism in the 1980s, of the 1992 exhibitions that marked the 500th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the Americas. Um, Today, we're seeing a number of high-profile art museums seeming to take more concrete steps, sometimes baby steps and sometimes bigger ones, toward making their collections and the story that they tell about American art more representative of the incredible range of art, and trying to become more inclusive of women artists, of Indigenous, Black and Brown artists, and LGBTQ artists. Does this moment feel different to you than those past efforts at inclusivity, or and do you see the potential for this change to be more substantial this time and more enduring? Do you want to start, Sean?
Well, I'm back. I look back and then go forward. I'm looking back at the 1970s when there were no books written about Native American art, and except for Jamaka Highwater's two books that he edited, and then the little catalogs that I did for the exhibitions that I organized and curated. A lot of times we would only get a brochure or a postcard, and there were very few catalogs because there just wasn't money afforded to contemporary Native art. So I'm looking at today's world from 1992 with the young Native Americans who came up with master's degrees, MFAs, and PhDs. And right now we have quite a few young people who are engaged in museum work, who are working as curators, who are working as administrators in the museum world. That's very good news for us. We need more of that. So, like, when I see tribes like the Duwamish tribe in Seattle that are not recognized, haven't been given, we have several hundred Native American tribes waiting for recognition. So, it's a constant, ongoing battle, I could say, between the status quo and and Native Americans. And of course, we always have the highest rate of diabetes. We have the highest rate of suicide among our population. So it's really tough for our young people, even today. And there's work to be done on every reservation. I do a lot of work on my reservation with the tribe, with Salish Kootenai College, with the daycare, with Nkusum, our our language school, our immersion language school, our longhouse. They all need help. So there's that ongoing thing, as well as Native art in this country not being recognized at the rate that other ethnic groups are recognized. We still have that to deal with. We still don't have like a large book of contemporary Native art. There are small books that are done at IAIA and the Eiteljorg and the Herd, but not anything very substantial. If you go online, you'll find 60 books on any given day of African American art. You'll find books on Haitian art, Jamaican art, Mexican art, but not Native American art. So we still have a lot of work to do.
There is still a lot of work to do. And Kay, how do you see how things are changing now? Do you see things changing? Do you feel hopeful about lasting change?
Well, when I first came to New York City, 1960, 59, 60, one of my goals was to help open up the mainstream to Native people, the mainstream art world. Um, I felt very strongly that this was an important thing to try to do. And as a matter of fact, in New York, there are now some galleries showing Native people and some young artists who are certainly showing their work. Um, there was a show in 1990 called The Decade Show, and it was designed to open up the mainstream to indigenous people, but also African Americans, Asian Americans. It was trying to be inclusive, and it was a show that was in 3 different museums, and it was a marvelous catalog. We all thought it was going to open up the art world absolutely. Um, I can't say it actually did that. In fact, the show came and was got a lot of good reviews and went, and that was that. And so that there have been changes. There have been changes for women. There have been changes for indigenous people, for people of color. But has it been what one would hope for, one would expect? Um, no, no, it has not. And I've been very fortunate, really. Um, but there's a whole lot of other important Native artists in this country who deserve retrospectives and a real active support. I think it could be a lot better. I don't think it's enough. It has improved, but improvement certainly has been slow.
Yeah, I agree. It's hopeful to see some of the change that's happening, but there's still so much work to be done, and so many artists who deserve to have their work better recognized and shown. So we certainly have a lot of work to do still. Um, I'd like to ask both of you a little bit about what you've been doing these past several months, this very strange year. How has this time been for you in terms of your creativity, and what are some of the things that you're really looking forward to going forward? Kay?
Well, I think that these last has it been 9 months now, um, have been relatively easy for artists because we have something to do. I can always go and make drawings of something. I don't feel that I don't feel particularly lonely. I don't feel particularly alone. I don't miss going out to a job because I'm happy to work at home. I have a husband who's an artist, Dirk Bach, and he's full of ideas all the time, an interesting conversationalist. And we talk about art, we talk about the art world, and we talk about politics, which I suppose everyone has the last 9 months. Um, so I'm not suffering. I think a lot of people have suffered over these last months. But as I said, I think artists are lucky in that we do have something that can occupy us that's fascinating. Painting is fascinating. It still fascinates me. It's still hard. It has never gotten easy. Uh, I'm doing what I've always done. The other thing is that um, we uh, we are not that social. So I don't need to go out to dinner all the time with people. I don't need all that. And I think that many artists are like me, that we are accustomed to working alone, and it's okay. So we're
Yeah.
getting along fine. We're taking good care of our health, and we'll be tremendously relieved when this is over.
Yes. How about you, Jean? How have these past several months been for you? And then I'll ask you both what you're looking forward to.
Well, it's actually been a bit hectic here because I'm raising two grandchildren and they're 10 and 12 and they're, tweens, which is not an easy age. Their hormones are pumping. And so, they're accessing social media, not always in the best way. Like one was taking pictures of twerking and, you know, that sort of thing. And so I get help from my son and his wife, who's a school teacher. Laura has been taking them in the afternoon to work with math and reading. So that's a help. I've been doing 2 to 3 Zoom calls a week with museums or, institutions. That has kept me busy working on a show for New York, and so I've been painting, working on a sculpture, a bronze, and I've also been working on a book, writing essays for other organizations and books. It's been like you would think, like sort of like lonely and isolated, and it is in a way. I'm missing my native friends who mostly live in Santa Fe, Michael McCabe and Linda Lomahaftua, Karita Coffey, Emmy Whitehorse. I'm missing them. I can email with them or call them on the phone or something. I'm missing going home to the reservation. That's making me really sad. But otherwise, it's been pretty hectic here, busy. And like right now, I have, we just caught a raccoon the other day, and this morning, they must have been having a rumpus out there last night, maybe more than one raccoon. I've lost 3 chickens this past week. That's got me upset right now because the chickens, they're part of my pets. So that keeps us on our toes here.
Well, I'm glad that you're both staying safe and well, and that you're able to continue painting. You're able to continue working during this time. Um, I feel hopeful hearing both of you talk about the work that you're doing and thinking about this being maybe kind of a somewhat dormant but fertile and creative time for so many people. And I really look forward to what's coming next for both of you. Thank you again so much for.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kay.
Nice to see you,
Thank you.
Sean.
Nice to see you too, Kay. Nice to see you looking so well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
It's so wonderful to see both of you, and I really appreciate both of you joining me for this conversation. And again, stay well, and we look forward to seeing what comes next for both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.